Good morning and greetings, everyone, and I hope you all rested from yesterday. It was a full day. Our session is like a graveyard session because it's an early morning on a Sunday morning, but we soldier on with the hope that we will have some delegates, early bed that are going to catch us. I want to welcome you. My name is Dora Marema. I am the Portfolio Head for Municipal Sustainability at the South African Local Government Association, responsible for climate change, environment, disaster management, and fire services. Just to kick us off, I just want to give a few remarks, and I think none of us have to be schooled on the fact that climate change is really predicted to increase, the frequency and severity of extreme climate events like droughts, floods, and seasonal rainfall patterns that are, shifting. It threatens to exacerbate existing gender inequalities, which means that in many countries, particularly in the developing nations, women face larger negative impacts than men as climate change threatens to undermine the livelihoods of millions of women and children. In South Africa in particular, for example, these existing gendered differential impacts of climate change are attributed to existing inequalities between men and women. We are one of the most unequal societies, which means that the gender division of labor, decision-making power, which affect the ability of women to access resources and entitlements often needed to effectively respond to effects of climate change is not there. According to the World Bank, country and climate development report for South Africa, which was published last year in October 2022, women face specific vulnerabilities and risks from climate change, particularly in rural areas. Female workers account for estimated between 60 and 80% of the agricultural workforce, both formal and informal, which is they are highly exposed to climate risks. Due to the traditional gender norms, and women tend to perform tasks impacted by droughts or water scarcity, such as collecting water for domestic use and collecting water for their animals as well as for watering their crops. Additionally, women who live in poorly serviced urban areas, in informal settlements and townships, usually have got less access to credit, access to agricultural inputs, extension services, as well as limited decision-making within the governance structures. And these are all the things that are needed to be able to enhance their adaptive capacity. So another element is that in post-climate disasters, such as floods, for example, women are usually amongst the first to lose their homes. They lose their jobs. The same thing we've seen with COVID-19. They lose their livelihoods, and again, they must work very long hours to be able to re-establish their livelihoods. Also that women and children are usually at a higher risk of being placed in unsafe shelters after climate events. In many cases, in these shelters, women and girls face unique challenges, including an increased risk of sexual and gender-based violence, limited access to sanitation facilities, and inadequate health care and reproductive services. They are put in halls that are really not adequate. So UN Women has noted that the disproportional impact of climate change on women and children, it's really a big issue. And they note that women are 14 times more likely than men to die during natural disasters such as floods and storms. In many parts of South Africa, women take primary role and responsibility for providing food, water, and energy to meet their households' needs. And in many households, mostly in rural areas, without access to improved water sources and clean energy, women and girls are the main water and solid fuel collectors. Women make up to 60 and 80% of agricultural labor force, and often at the forefront of subsistence agriculture, which is really the backbone of providing livelihoods for many in their households. So to be able to help us have this conversation this morning around the food, water, gender nexus, which really is something that we should be looking at. I've got my panelists, Ms. Zama Kuzwayo from eThekwini Municipality, and I'm going to ask you to come in the front. I have Honorable Councillor Kinalema Mpukunzi, the Mayor of Tswelopele Municipality, as well as the Climate Change Commissioner on the Presidential Climate Commission in South Africa. I have got someone who's still on their way, is not yet here, Ms. Noloyiso Walingo, who is with the Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Management Department of KwaZulu-Natal Province. We have online, and I hope that she's managed to join, Ms. Ndivile Mokwena from Gender CC Women for Climate Justice in South Africa, someone who has been working on these issues for many years. Lastly, I have Paul Curry, who is with ITLE Africa, whom I'm really grateful to have in this panel. So I'm going to start with you, Honorable Kinalema Mpukunzi, really just to reflect to us and also just share with us how your municipality is tackling or improving the impacts of climate change against women and children.
No, good morning. Thank you, Madam Moderator. As said that my name is Kinalema Mpukunzi. Indeed, I'm from Tswelopele Municipality. For those that don't know Tswelopele, Tswelopele is one municipality in the Free State which its economy is based on agriculture. The topic that we are discussing is very close to my heart because without agriculture, there is no food, there is nothing. What we are doing as this small municipality in the Free State is that we've got programs that are part of the integrated development planning, that we also put a budget aside for the programs that speaks to women and children. But what is critical and important that we are aware that SALGA has a women commission that was cascaded down to municipalities where we had to have the multi-women caucuses, the women commission at the district level and at the municipal level. Let me speak to my municipality. As I said that my municipality's economy is based on agriculture. What we are doing, because we can't devolve agriculture from climate change, food security is very important. We've got a program that is called 100,000 trees, with 1,000 stories that we are doing with different organizations of women. That's where we empower women, we give them knowledge, we give them information about climate change and the risk of climate change and its own disasters. But we equally incorporate even the white communities, because if you leave them behind, they are the commercial farmers. And they've also been excluded as the African women that have been excluded in the past. So programs that we are doing, they are centered around the wards. It's a wards-based programs. We've got pieces of land, the portions of land that belongs to the municipality that we gave to these women to empower them so that they can be able to sustain their homes and their lives of their families. Because if you empower a woman, you are empowering the nation. You can't do anything without empowerment. But the challenge is that the girl children are the most ones at risk because with everything that is happening, and with the poor families, the girl children are always deprived. Even if they're supposed to go to school during their cycle of their periods, they can't go there. So we as municipality, we are the ones that has to make sure that they are well taken care of. They are catered in all the programs of the municipality. Through the programs of your CDWs and extension officers, that's where we engage with all the women organizations and engage them to say these are the programs in terms of climate change, because as and when we deal with food security, you must also mitigate and adapt in terms of climate change, because if we are not going to have anything, it means the lives will be lost. And the issue of water, because we are a scarce country as South Africa with water. Maybe I need to share that we don't buy water from the boards, the clean water. We purify our own water. And I do have in municipalities women that are processors, water control processors that are working at the plants. So on its own, it's one of the issues that we are using to empower this woman. I will hand over to you back, Madam Moderator.
No, thank you so much, Honorable Mpukunzi. I think it's very interesting what you're sharing in terms of your smaller municipality and really not leaving nobody behind, including the commercial farmers that are unfortunately also being negatively impacted. And amongst those, you will have women because they are the majority in terms of those who are focusing on agriculture. I then want to turn to you, Zama. And I want to ask you the question in terms of what is your city doing to tackle and to improve the impacts of climate change against women and children? Because we know that in many of the cities, you have also a lot of vulnerable communities that are in informal settlements, but also in the townships, and events like the ones that we have witnessed really pushing them even further into vulnerability and caught up in the cycle of poverty. So please share with us how the city of eThekwini is tackling these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to share in terms of what is it that we are doing as the city of eThekwini with regards to dealing with the impacts of climate change, but really focusing in terms of how does it impact our women and children. Indeed, we are a city that is very vulnerable, and most of the people do not know that about 70% of eThekwini is actually a rural city. Only the few will know that eThekwini is not actually the most urban city, even though we also struggle with the issues of informality, over 500 informal settlements that we have in the city. We've been trying in terms of trialing the issues of adapting to climate change, teaching our communities, introducing them to new food, because one of the things that we have noticed is that there will be a shift in terms of what we can produce as the city. The staple foods that we are used to might change in the future. So we started running a program early in the 2011 where we started trialing new foods and introducing new crops to the people in terms of like cassava, which we have identified as some of the things that will be driving by then with our future projections. But there's a very specific project that we are doing as eThekwini where we are doing aquaponics, where we are providing support to rural women. I remember when this was introduced, I was very worried in terms, I own a fish pond and I know how much it takes to maintain a fish pond. But with the kind of techniques and the technology that was introduced, we introduced something that was suitable for the rural woman to maintain, of which actually it was a self-maintained ponds, and then they are able to equally produce their vegetation in these rural areas. And in terms of the water, it was something also that I was worried about in terms of then how will these women be able to maintain the water? Where would be the source of water in terms of cleansing these ponds and ensuring that it's sustainable? It's something that doesn't require a lot of maintenance. So even the technique that we use, it's self-maintenance, doesn't require a lot of water, doesn't require a lot of maintenance. And these women are actually striving in terms of the market. The other things that we were worried about was the type of species of fishes that they could, farm in these ponds. And the way that we have selected them, we selected the most resilient, species like the tilapia and the catfish. And we are seeing these women that now they are thriving in terms of being aquaponic farmers, and they are selling and making money to their communities. And the most interesting part, because it is very important to have healthy communities, and these food that they are producing, it's organic food, which means we are sustaining their livelihoods and promoting a healthy lifestyle. So it's part of those innovations that we are seeing in eThekwini, and these support, we actually group the women. It will not be one woman that is being supported in this program, but we tend to have a group of 6 to 8 women, and we have 500 groups that we are supporting throughout the city at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zama. Thank you. I think it's very enlightening that the eThekwini has embarked on a variety of interventions like the ones that you are talking about. I think it will be interesting for us to learn more in terms of how are you planning to be able to scale them up, because we know that municipalities always struggle to be able to look at how they can be able to identify transformational interventions that are targeting the most vulnerable in their constituent in their communities, and be able to scale them up in such a way that you could be able to reach a considerable number of women. We have been joined online by someone I know very well, Ausindivile Mokoena, who has worked really for many years on this topic. And Ausindivile, I would like to find out how does Gender CC Women for Climate Justice South Africa work to integrate or to improve the work, to improve the work on the fight against negative impacts of climate change against women and their children.
Thank you so much, Ostora. Good morning, everyone. I'm joining using my phone. I hope you can see me clearly because I struggled with my laptop. But nevertheless, I'm happy that I was able to join. Yes, Gender CC Women for Climate Justice, we are engaging in various interventions, starting from raising awareness at community level and doing training and capacity building for marginalized communities, for smallholder farmers, for women organizations, and also community-based organizations. And we also engage with government at policy level, both national, provincial, and local government, where we are advocating for the integration of gender into climate change policies. And what our interventions at local level, they help the communities to know what is happening around them, to be able to identify the challenges that they are facing, climate change challenges that they are facing at local level, because the impacts are localized. Different areas will experience different types of climate change, from water, electricity to food. And as we know that in South Africa, there's a lot of poverty, unemployment, and inequalities, which are exacerbated by the impacts of climate change. So our capacity building and training helps them to have that inquisitive mind, to be able to seek and search for more information, be more organized, and also engage meaningfully with local councillors and the government during the stakeholder consultations. And with our work with the government, we work with other institutions like Adaptation Network, SANBI, and GIZ. And we are currently working with the DFFE and SANBI on nationalizing the UNFCCC Gender Action Plan. Because we feel as an organization, if gender issues are not captured or integrated into climate change policies, when it comes to implementation, women will forever be left behind. There won't be any implementation that is related to addressing the priorities and needs of women, as we know of the differentiated impacts of climate change. So women have priorities, have needs, and they have solutions to the problems that they are facing at local level, as they are the knitters of society. They are the custodians of water, of energy, and of food. So it is important that their voices are captured into the climate change policies. We are also implementing concrete projects at local level where they are trained to on agroecology farming. And as we all know that land is an issue, so they are using land from schools, from clinics and local churches. And also they are taught how to harvest water. We have installed biogas digesters in these schools so that the school can also save on energy, be able to use the gas from the biogas digesters. These community members are custodians of those biogas digesters. They are feeding them, they are maintaining them, and they are regulating them. And women have also started saving towards solar panels so that they can be able to install solar panels for each household. So yeah, that is what we are busy with at the moment. And we are also working on the policy on climate change adaptation and mitigation plan on agriculture and food systems, because that is another huge issue that is affecting smallholder farmers. The food system from production to consumption. There are huge problems in that area, in that sector, where smallholder farmers are not taken into consideration. They are also excluded in the processes that are taking place. They're excluded in the resources and finances. Yeah, I think I'll stop there now, Sis Dora. I'll add on with the next question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Austin Deville. I think one of the key messages I'm getting from you is that it is important to really work and engage with women's groups proactively, because, you know, and I think I like what you're saying, that to raise their awareness so that they can be able to engage with their local governments and provincial and national, to be able to be engaged and consulted on the various policies that are targeting them, because we know that out of sight is out of mind, that we might end up with policies that are not responding to their plight if they are not engaged and if they are not actively there to be able to engage on these issues. I'm going to turn to Paul. I would like to find out how Italy support inclusive outcomes for food and water security, as well as climate change adaptation.
Thanks so much. This one looks a bit better. Thanks so much, Dora, and my appreciation for being on a panel of such esteemed women leaders. I really feel moved to be here and to be talking around a really important topic, which is about connecting a whole set of different systems. Oftentimes we talk about one siloed issue, one sector in isolation, but talking about gender as it relates to climate and food and water is vital, and these conversations are beginning more and more, which is fabulous. I think everyone has provided a really good baseline for understanding and reiterating how much women are overlooked in the normative economy. The fact that care economy is not part of how we measure GDP means that entire contributions of women are lost to how we understand success in our society. And as our sisters just mentioned online, we're very aware that resources do not flow to women. They go through male-headed households and others, and we know that women-headed households have higher poverty rates than male-headed households. So we know that we're starting from a really difficult point of how we create a sense of equity. And the entry point from my unit, which is looking at urban systems and infrastructure, basically makes the argument that access to basic services is a climate adaptation intervention. So if we think about the lack of electricity in a household means that we don't have refrigeration to look after or to keep our food fresh, means that women are going to the market every day to get fresh food. If we don't have good solid energy in the household, we are using charcoal to cook or wood to cook, which is then leading to deforestation and reinforcing environmental degradation. So the provision of basic services that reduce the amount of time that women have to spend looking after the household is the best thing that we can do for an inclusive approach to climate adaptation from our perspective. Our role is ICLEI, very similarly to SALGA. We are a network of local governments, and so it's really moving to hear the stories about working with women's groups, and many of the local government members have similar initiatives like that. Our role is to share the stories from a lot of different local governments about how to better do the work that they're attempting to do, as they're the closest to citizens. So the two reflections that I'd like to share at the moment are, when it comes to food and water systems, many local governments don't believe that they have a responsibility to influence these systems. They say, well, food belongs to the Department of Agriculture, it's up to them. Water belongs to Department of Water or the provincial departments. And so our role is saying, actually, you have urban planning, public health mandates, environmental health mandates, waste management mandates, and a whole set of responsibilities that influence the food system. And how can you use these tools to improve food security outcomes? So on the one hand, it's very important to invest in more agriculture, but where we invest in markets is also really important. Are we providing sanitation services for the predominantly women vendors in our markets? Are we providing effective space, particularly for informal vendors, to properly store their food so that they don't lose food that is no longer fresh, and things like that? So supporting local governments to understand that they have a massive mandate with regards to food and water is one of our pieces of work. And then profiling success stories. So I desperately want to hear more about the aquaculture. I want to hear more about the work with the smallholder farmers. And I'll share two reflections from Arusha City Council in Tanzania and Antananarivo in Madagascar. In Antananarivo, there was a project where the local government was investing, as we've discussed before, in financial literacy for aquaculture as well. And effectively saying, okay, you can start a business, but how are you ensuring that you're saving enough to invest in growing this? And so that single intervention on financial literacy means that the women-owned businesses could be robust and reinforce themselves and no longer rely on grant funding or inputs from the local government. And then in Arusha, they created a program of revolving loans, specifically for women and youth. I think 70% to women, 20% to youth, and 10% to people with disabilities, to invest in small businesses. And the program that they had was incredibly successful because they had strong mentors in that program. And so the businesses were paying back. And so suddenly from, I think, 5,000 or 5 million shillings per year, they were getting full payback and able to reinvest in new businesses. And so that's a really interesting model for the local government to offer loans directly, where women entrepreneurs would not be able to access bank loans. So I thought those were very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paula. I think you are highlighting something that is really profound in my view, that just providing basic services, access to clean water, access to food, access to energy services, already is an adaptation measure for many of the women and children. And I think sometimes we forget that some of the most basic interventions are actually some of the most transformational interventions. Without looking at mechanical ways of ensuring that the adaptation happens in many communities. So I really appreciate what you just said. You will say it. You will say it in the next round, because we really just have. We're going to have a question to that. I want to quickly rush to you, Noloyiso, being at the provincial government, responsible for supporting municipalities to do exactly what Paul is saying. How does your work ensure that municipalities are really lessening the negative impacts of climate change on women and children?
Thank you, and good morning, Dora, and my fellow panelists. Apologies for arriving late. Yeah, before I go to your question, I just want to share a story, not a story as such, but I want to say something that a few weeks ago, I was in a Women in Environment conference, and Stats SA presented the statistics of women in leadership, women in this and women in that. And it broke my heart so much to learn just how far behind we are in terms of transforming the systems to make sure that women are actually gaining the momentum in terms of the transformational programs. Be that as it may, the anger that I had from that statistic, it got me thinking differently so that we can actually change the way we are doing things. Now, coming to your question, I think one of the ways to start is to start at a strategy and policy level, because that is when traction will be gained. Make sure that your strategy and policy does address that, and it is very strategic in its approach. When we were developing the climate change, reviewing the climate change strategy, we were very emphatic on the vulnerability assessment that saw women and young people as the vulnerable groups in the society, so that you can mainstream your strategy towards the transformational programs that will be in it. Just also to share that we are in partnership, you might know that, with the South African National Biodiversity Institute, who are the executors of the GEF funding that seeks to build capacity of the young women in climate adaptation. And with that partnership, we've got 3 women now who are sitting with us for 2 years to be empowered in terms of climate adaptation. But critically, with our work supporting local government, which is very important, one of the best things that happened was when moving from local government to provincial government, it was easy for me to look back and say, this is what is needed. So where we are moving now, we are driving the same strategy and policy transformation, and also channeling the funding that will prioritize the projects that will support more than 70% of women in each project. We are working also with the likes of the Ugu District Municipality, KwaZulu Municipality, in Ugu, where we are piloting a triple approach project whereby we seek to support the work of women in energy security, agriculture, and water security. I'm looking forward to that project succeeding in terms of the entire energy, water, and agriculture nexus, where with the households in that village, there's no service. There's no service, and so it's important for us to support Ugu Umdoni municipality to get those services. While government is not there yet, then we need to get these women and these young girls. By the way, I remember in the one workshop, they were told that you know nothing and you cannot do it. We've been living like this. And I asked them a hard question. I said, are you going to listen to that? Is that how we are going to be for your whole life? Are you going to be using firewood to cook? Are you going to be walking into the river? Are you going to be... And then also the village is also full of old women who are heading their households. And then they made, the assessment that we did, indicated that these households that are led by old women cannot form a part of the program because we cannot sustain it. Then I said, no, we cannot punish them for being old. Rather, let's take the younger women to be the ones now who create employment for them to work to support the old women in the program. So I'm looking forward to that success so that we can ensure that they can have water security, they can have energy security, and they can also have food security. And that is also our own vision of a localized just transition, and I'm looking forward to that.
No, thank you so much, Zama. I think what you are talking about in terms of the looking at the people who are aged and looking at the young people and actually, integrating them together, because what you are doing there, you are also facilitating the transmission of indigenous knowledge, which is something that we so much need at this time, particularly around water and around food. As areas that are heavily impacted by climate change and how we can be able to resolve. I know that there's a lot of move towards forward-looking in terms of what are the innovative ways, what is the technology. But again, a lot lies in the wisdom of what we know in the past that we need to be able to bring in so that there can be transformational interventions. I'm going to ask you in about 2 minutes that we look forward. I think we already know that this work is one of the hard sells. It's really easy for us to gather during the Women's Month or the International Women and talk about the impacts of climate change on women. But again, the opportunities that lie when you bring in women and the youth into the various platforms for them to become catalysts of change, given the proximity that they have to the natural environment, being the majority in terms of subsistence farming, and really playing a big role in terms of ensuring that their homes and their livelihoods, the livelihoods of their families are really secured. I want to start with you, Austin Deville Online, and given the work that Gender CC has done for many years, what do you think would be the best approach for us to be able to integrate this work in the climate change adaptation plans and climate change mitigation plans at a local level, to really make sure that those plans are centering women's issues? Because I believe that when you center interventions and plans around women, you are then going to take care of the whole society. But what are the approaches? What are the strategies that we can use to be able to? We've got an opportunity with the climate change bill, which will become an act. Municipalities are supposed to produce these plans that are supposed to be renewed every 5 years. What is the approach? What are some of the innovative approaches that would move us forward? Because we know that we've been talking about this. And unfortunately, as Noleisho said, Statistics SA was telling us that we are really not doing well. How are we going to be able to transform and to change this landscape going forward?
Thank you, Sesitora. I think we need to look at an intersectional approach where we looking at every sector. We look at social issues, development issues, and also human rights issues as part of the process in addressing climate change, and also building adaptive capacities at local level and building resilience. And also working together. I think it's about time we stop working against each other, because I'm sure time and experience has proven to all of us that we need each other. We need to work together. And also, I'm glad that as civil society, we have seen some progress when it comes to government in closing the silos. Because when we started working at policy level, that's what we discovered, that government departments are working in silos, but everyone has to come on board. Health, water, spatial planning, urban planning, and also agriculture, because all these sectors are interlinked. And as I said, that we need everyone on board. When we talk about women, let's stop looking at women at academic level, women in business, but let's also consider the very women who are at local level, the very women who are at the coalface of climate change. Those are the ones who are feeling the impacts of climate change. So I think an integrated approach is what we need. And also, I think you mentioned this, Sistora, about the wisdom, the traditional wisdom that we need not ignore. You know, the indigenous knowledge and traditional practices has to also inform the policies, the climate actions, and the programs that are being implemented by government, whether it's local, provincial, or at national level. So there has to be that vertical and a horizontal flow of communication. Let's not forget the people at local level, and let's take into consideration the bottom-up approach. What is happening at local level? Let it inform the decisions that are being taken at national level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Honorable Mayor Pukunzi, I think Austin Deville is articulated clearly what is required, bottom-up approaches. Let's work together, all hands on deck. The most vulnerable women at the community level who are at the coal face, and I believe You, as a female political leader in a small rural municipality in the Free State, you clearly cannot be taught about this because you live this every day. And my question to you is, what are some of the interventions that local government can be able to do to be able to accelerate this work? We cannot wait any longer. It can be that the majority of the population on this planet are being excluded from the decisions that are going to affect the most. So what do you think that local government could be able to do to accelerate this work?
Thank you, Sis. The local governments are crucial to addressing climate change as frontline responders. In the effect of global warming, they must create sustainable development pathways for resilient communities. That's the first one. And how do we do that? We do it through the integrated development planning, where all sectors and departments are included as and when we plan. In this process that we are now, we are in the process of reviewing our own IDPs. That's where all sectors are required to come and form part and give their own inputs. We must not wait for the IDPs to be finalized, then we come later and say, this is what we think it must be done. But what is critical and important is that women and children vulnerability to climate change at the local level must be thoroughly researched so that solutions that must be specific needs written in communities. It must not be one size fits all because our municipalities are not the same. And then some of the specific actions that local government could develop to support women include the following, but not limited to those ones. Develop a women-centered local climate change adaptation practices, diversification of income sources, access to information and funding project of women. We must also ensure that local government climate change response strategies and action plans enable full participation of youth, women, and elderries, including the people with disabilities. Experts to give women and each say in how resources should be allocated in terms of adaptation. Because if we are not going to do that, we will have programs that will only be centered around what we need as municipalities. And we all are aware that women are the most vulnerable to all these effects of climate change, and we need to maintain our budget to cater for women-centered programs. We need to empower them, take them along. We must not leave anyone behind. We must make sure that on our daily programs, issues that affect women are topic of the daily things. We must go out and have sessions with everybody, but mostly focus on women and children because climate change is real. We cannot fight the fact that climate change, we still want to argue whether climate change is here or what, but we must have crucial programs that are addressing women issues, that are focusing mostly on women. And what I'm going to raise is it might not be palatable. Municipalities are expected to render services in an effective and efficient manner in terms of your Section 152 of the Constitution. But the very same municipalities don't have a sufficient budget. So we are calling on all national governments and everybody else that got money to make sure that funding is accessed by local government so that we can empower those women, because without empowering them, our municipalities will never be viable.
Thank you so much, Councillor Pukunsi, and I think this leads me to you, Zama. Councillor Pukunsi has been talking about the role of local government, what municipalities could be able to do. In this COP, and I think in the previous ones in recent years, we have seen that there is an attempt to be able to include the role of the subnationals in the fight against climate change. In this one in particular, COP28, we had the second interministerial on urbanization, that so the ministers come together with the mayors. We've had the climate summit, local action climate summit in the beginning of the COP, supported by Bloomberg. And I think it's getting more and more urgent that subnationals really be integrated in the country, national determined contributions in the country's plans. And I want to ask you, what do you think would be the best approach to be able to empower cities like eThekwini to be able to be in the forefront of building resiliency of the most vulnerable in their own communities. And again, harness on the various opportunities and strengths that arise with this global crisis.
Look, Sisindivile and Mamea here had already touched up on some of the issues. I want to touch on the integration first that Sisindivile spoke about. But what is critical is that as we integrate the work so that we can have the greatest impact in terms of what we're doing while we're working in silos, is that there needs to be a bottom-up approach. As the monies are rolling down, it must be based on the down needs, not what the national government thinks what we need. Even I, as the city, I need to listen to my communities in terms of what they need. Because if I'm in the boardroom and think for them, I will miss the point. I need to go down to the level of these communities to know what they need. So that bottom-up approach is very important as we integrate our work so that we have the impact. I also want to touch on this issue of the municipalities lacking funding to do that layer of resilience and sustainability, protecting their communities against climate change. I want to say that municipalities, or actually even government, cannot do it all. Collaborations and partnerships with the private sector, we need to find a way to open up our hands for the private sector to play their role in this sector. We need the private sector to assist us in delivering some of the initiatives that we want to bring. I do have an example where we partnered with Coca-Cola to bring water for the communities. I remember we were just in the middle of COVID. We entered into a partnership. The municipality spent zero, but Coca-Cola, they knew that water is important. We needed to wash our hands. But how do you wash your hands without water when you're in a rural community? How do you go out and fetch water when you're in a lockdown and you're not supposed to be out? And yet you are supposed to be walking kilometers. But with that private-public partnership, we were able to bring 3 water systems around communities. So let's allow the private partnership to thrive. I know it's a struggle, but we need to open up a little bit. And I also want to re-emphasize in terms of innovation. We need innovation. There is no money. So in whatever innovation that we can have, it's very important. So I see when we are sitting here at COPs, we listen to a lot of what other developed world are doing and saying. I see the solutions, they're very sophisticated and requiring a lot of money. But we need to be innovative in our own way. We need our indigenous solutions based on our needs that are suitable. You know, those solutions that are suitable for our systems in order to thrive. I see people are doing carbon harvesting. Why not plant the trees? Why don't we protect our forests to do that? So that is our own way in terms of innovation and solution to say that it fits us, it fits our budget, and so this is how we can keep on going and accelerating these issues.
Mazama, Noloyi, so in 2 minutes, how are you planning to, how could you support municipalities as they are embarking on the journey of developing climate action plans and conducting their risk and vulnerability assessments to do exactly what Zama is saying, to be on the ground, to be informed by the voices of the people?
Just in closing, very quickly, I'm inspired in KwaZulu-Natal by the fact that the Premier is the leader of the highest climate change structure called the KwaZulu-Natal Climate Change Council. And she's very vocal about the women issues. Dora, I think that we need to, the mainstreaming and integration needs to be done in a very deliberate way with an intention to change. I remember when we finalized our climate change strategy review, the gender mainstreaming became one of those cross-cutting issues that are coming out very strongly. And I think now with this with the next round of the review of adaptation plans in municipalities, that is also where we need to start. We need to really, because at that time it was just to make sure that we can have projects that can be supported, and that is actually how we had funded them as provincial government. But now, this time around, it's very clear. I mean, April 22, floods in KwaZulu-Natal showed us flames in terms of how vulnerable women and children are and how unprepared we were, especially to protect those women and children. So I really think that the next round of reviews must reconsider that and with a deliberate purpose to change, because we need to change the landscape. I want to overemphasize the part that Zama has just said of partnerships with the like-minded organizations. But lastly, I want to touch on something. I participated for the first time in the Women in Science work this year, and I was very much inspired by how we can actually drive change, the change that we want as women. Women in science, and then all the way down to the school level, the young girls in high school and primary school driving that change, because they must be knowledgeable. And if it means solutions come from science, they will drive that. And science, not only just hard science, it's also the citizen science as well. And that is what you need to infuse in the local government plans. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Paul, I think I'll give you the last word of this panel. I know you wanted to share another thought or another nugget, but I want to ask you, with Itlay having, working around the world and working with many cities and many municipalities, what are some of the transformational actions and interventions and strategies that cities and municipalities around the world have really piloted or championed to be able to ensure that women and children are integrated in climate change response?
Thanks. You can't give me the last word on a panel about women only, so I look forward to your wrap-up. But maybe three points, I think, just what I wanted to add to the point about basic services being a climate adaptation point. We talk quite clinically sometimes. Actually, basic services offer us another resource, which is dignity and ownership. And so that is something we need to be really aware of. Giving tenure for land ownership and the dignity of good services is a resource we have to cherish. Everyone has mentioned that we need to work together. And to be a bit provocative, I want to suggest that gender mainstreaming is not a women's issue. Lack of resources is not a women's issue. Sexual abuse is not a women's issue. These are also men's issues. And in these conversations, we have to improve how we are training our boys, how we're training our men to understand that women have a role and a responsibility that needs acknowledgement and understanding and elevation. So if we want more women leaders in our roles, we need men to vote for them, and to feel clear understanding and confidence in voting for women. So similarly, another role that many of our cities are taking on is intergenerational leadership. There are many youth councils or approaches like that. We believe very much in intergenerational dialogue. We know that the average or the median age for African population is 19 and a half years, whereas most of our leaders are 65. So we really need to bridge that gap. Not to be dismissive of our elders, of course, but to bring them into conversation and do co-leadership. So that's something I really want to promote. And then finally, to echo the point, local governments have the mandate, but they don't have the resources. So we need novel ways of budgeting, gender budgeting, and new ways to look at budget that don't just, oh, well, you had this budget last year, you get it again. How are we actually interrogating what the priorities are? Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Paul, and that's why I gave you the last word, because actually issues around women and gender are not a solo woman. We need men to be speaking, and we need men to take up space and really take responsibility to making sure that the majority, as I said, of our populations, not only in South Africa but around the world, are not out of sight and out of mind. Because I think for me that is really, really critical. When men start talking about these issues, I believe that the conversation will shift. So I want to thank my panel. I want to thank you, Austin de Ville. I know it's quite early and it's a Sunday morning, and thank you for navigating the technical challenge to join us. I want to thank my panel in the room. We were the first, and I know that this is one of the most important sessions. Do not be fooled by the empty seats. When we have exhausted carbon capture, when we have exhausted all the technical solutions that we came up, we will go back and do the most basic thing, which is actually to sit with the women and the gogos in the many villages that are affected and say, how did you do it many, many years ago? Because we tried this mechanically and we realized that we live in a very systematic world, that these issues are interconnected. And as you try and solve one piece, it's not a car that you think this is the part that is broken, I'm going to take it and fix it and put it back and hoping that it's going to work. It doesn't work like that. When you tackle food, you need to tackle water, you need to tackle energy, you need to tackle so many things that are interconnected. And I think that wisdom lies in many, 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 many of our grandmothers that I believe many of us here actually learned a lot. Yeah, so thank you so much to the audience. And unfortunately, because we started very late, while waiting for you, we couldn't be able to take questions. Thank you, and have a good day.